the thing, but just so I can see. Yeah, just so I can see the slides. All right, I can see. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna, what, love? Maybe I'll make it a little bit lower. So, we'll see if it picks up. You know what? It's pretty full, yeah. Did you have your, oh, you got yours. All right.
Good morning, All Saints Church and viewers at large. Keith, can we get a sound check? Are we good? All right, I got a thumbs up. I am Susan Russell, one of the priests on staff here. My pronouns are she, her, and I could not be more thrilled to welcome all of you, those here at 132, and also those of you watching online, to the launch of our 25-26 Forum Series. We're back in the Forum. It's been a while. But we're back, and we'll have a series of forums throughout the coming year. At this point, we're aiming for once a month, and then we'll build back better, as I think someone used to say. But we're grateful, and I'm thrilled personally that we're able to launch on this coming out weekend. Oh, by the way, I'm queer, I'm gay, I'm a lesbian, I'm here, and I'm out. So, yeah, applause is in order. Whoever you are and wherever you find yourself on the journey, whether you're in or out, we hope you'll find a place here to learn, be inspired and informed about some of the legal landscape of what's going on in our world right now, and absolutely no one better on the planet to do that for us than our speaker guest this morning. Jenny Pizer is the Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives and the Special Counsel to the CEO, yes, I wrote it down, for Lambda Legal. One of our country's most influential, most important stopgaps, backstops, guardrails for protecting what's left of our constitutional protections. And Jenny has a long history. I think we've known each other since the Prop 8 battles in 2008. When I was looking for a photo to use, I did the face search. I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember that Pride Parade. So. Thrilled to have you with us today, and I don't want to take up any more time. I just want to make sure we get Jenny's presentation, and there will be a little time for Q&A afterwards. So now please give it up for Jenny Pizer.
So, well, I am thrilled to be back here, and it's a great honor to relaunch the forum, and I want to say not only have we been friends for more years than maybe we want to count, I want to thank my dear friend and colleague Rick Davis, who invited me to come and be here. It's a little early for me, but no better reason to be up and out on a Sunday. And to be together to celebrate National Coming Out Weekend. Yesterday was National Coming Out Day, and it's a really important part of our movement because invisibility has always been our biggest challenge. And when we're invisible, people can say untrue things about us and use us for political purposes and do things that are sometimes driven by ignorance, sometimes by political opportunism. But we have to respond, and we can respond by coming out and by educating in good faith, telling the truth, telling our stories. And by doing so, we have prevailed again and again throughout the history of our modern movement. But it's taken time and allies. And so I am so grateful to be here with all of you and with those of you who are here online, because this is an effort that we do together. And by doing so, we make our world and our society a better place, a safer place. And no time like the present for doing more of that. But so where did National Coming Out Day come from? I didn't really remember this. Some of you may not remember. Well, it was a response in part to our U.S. Supreme Court, which again is not doing us particularly proud, but back in 1986, the Supreme Court ruled in a case called Bowers against Hardwick that there is no constitutional protection for same-sex couples engaging in adult intimacy in our own bedrooms. And that Supreme Court decision dripped with contempt for even the idea that we might have the same constitutional rights as other Americans. And it was hurtful, it was problematic, and it inspired many of us to come out and protest the following fall, October of 1987. My wife, Dorina, and I were there. It was amazing. As I remember, we had about 28 Asian American lesbians sleeping on our floor. It was an extraordinary weekend. But it wasn't just in protest, it was also in grief, because mid-'80s, what was happening, we were losing so many of our brothers to AIDS, and our government seemed to not care at all, and there were some civic leaders sad to say, some religious leaders who took advantage of what was happening, blamed us for our own devastating losses. It was horrible, and this was the first time that the AIDS Memorial quilt was displayed on the mall that same weekend. But because we organized, we came out, we built our own institutions. 16 years later, we prevailed in the Supreme Court. Lambda Legal was proud to represent John Lawrence and Tyrone Garner in that case, and to succeed with an opinion that didn't just recognize that we do in fact have constitutional privacy rights, but that the decision 17 years prior had been wrong and needed to be explicitly overturned. So we've had cycles of these defamatory attacks, of lies being said about us that are used for political purposes. So Anita Bryant, somewhat infamously I would say, was notable in this kind of a cycle, campaigning to see some of the first non-discrimination ordinances that had been passed in Florida, of all places, in Broward County, to campaign to have them repealed with defamatory lies about gay men, claiming that gay men are sexual predators of children. It's a pernicious lie, and it was politically very effective. Here in California, some folks, if you're as old as some of us are, will remember John Briggs attempting the same thing and our community rising up and preventing that from passing. Really, really important. That the efforts to organize against us at the ballot box had an important moment in the Supreme Court with Lambda Legal's challenge that we did together with the ACLU and some other colleagues. Thank you. And some other colleagues that went all the way to the Supreme Court, with the Supreme Court recognizing that Colorado's constitutional amendment to treat lesbian, gay, bisexual people differently and provide lesser political rights, that was unconstitutional. That was the first time that the Supreme Court had recognized that we as a targeted community of people have equality rights. But there was a similar cycle with AIDS-related panic, discrimination based on fear of contagion, but also pernicious lies. Again, we had to organize, we had to speak out, we had to come out. And we dealt with the same thing as we were seeking protection for same-sex couples and our families, pernicious lies that same-sex couples, lesbian, gay, bisexual couples, are not good parents to their children, or somehow are not good parents in ways that affect the children of different sex couples. There were some arguments that really didn't make sense, but they had an emotional resonance that was very politically effective until we came out, until we told our stories, until at Lambda Legal we litigated many, many cases in which we represented wonderful, courageous couples who shared their family stories, including stories of the harm, the discrimination that they'd experienced because of discrimination in our family code, the denial of the freedom to marry. And now the cycle that we're in, as I imagine and hope we all know, and I want to appreciate the trans flag here, is a targeting of transgender and non-binary folks, and young people in particular. That's the struggle of the moment and the coming out that is happening and is needed, and for all of us who are not personally experiencing this discrimination to come out as allies, because it's only by coming out and speaking out and doing the public education that we get through these cycles, and we will do it again. We will do it again because our clients come out and tell their stories, and because we've been doing this at Lambda Legal for more than 50 years, people understand that we are everywhere. We're in every community. We're in every community of faith. We're in every racial and ethnic group. And so here's a plug, a shameless plug, for a book. For those of you seeing on video, you may see I have copies of the book here, and it's available from Lambda Legal. So this was a real, I will say, a love letter that I wrote with a wonderful, brilliant political science professor, Ellen Anderson, about Lambda Legal's 50 years worth of work to achieve freedom, liberation, and equality for LGBTQ plus people. And the books are available. It's a coffee table book. It's not your typical law book. The publishers were a little taken aback as we got into this project because they publish beautiful coffee table books, which it is. It has more words than they're used to having in a coffee table book. It has so many more photos than you'll ever see in a law book, and it's written for general readers. And the point is that doing this book and doing this work has given me three key points of historical perspective. You'll hear me saying again and again today, we've been through really hard times before, and ultimately we prevailed. But the attacks on LGBTQ plus people that we're experiencing now are on a scale that I have not seen before, and I have been at this for a while, and I know many folks with us today have been with this for a while. This year alone, we saw more than 600 bills introduced in state legislatures to further discrimination, to target LGBTQ plus people. And at the same time, that there are more attack bills than ever before, we have more allies and more support than we ever have had before. So this is a very serious, high-profile fight, and among the things that's important for us to embrace and that gives us hope and a sense of possibility here is that, and this is a little bit maybe a search for a silver lining, but the attacks that we're all experiencing are so broad and they're so obvious and they're so irrational that everybody has a direct personal stake in defending our democracy and fighting back against these attacks. And so this map just shows that this has been a nationwide assault. Only Vermont and the District of Columbia did not see bills to attack our community introduced in this session alone. And these bills, you can see the areas of attack that are particularly pernicious. They're about schools and going after teachers and censorship and free speech, weakening civil rights laws, and limiting access to health care, in particular health care for transgender young people suffering from gender dysphoria. So it's been overwhelming, but there are specific areas of targeting that are really quite serious. It's really about whether young people are going to have the opportunity to learn and figure out who they are and come out and know that they can be themselves and be safe. Because that's not the message that people are receiving right now. Now, I said more than 600 bills introduced. If you look back over a couple of years, just the past 3 years, it's been more than 1,600. And this is something that has been building over the past really decade and a half to the current really frenzy that we're seeing now. And it's not just legislatures, it's also governors and attorneys general and other leaders who have been using power to go after members of our community. And the impact is really serious, the impact on mental health, the impact on people's lives. I will say, Rick, my colleagues at Lambda Legal, and our colleagues in the broader LGBT movement, we've been fighting back. We've been fighting back for years, and we have had dozens of lawsuits fighting against these state bills when they have become law, and policies of governors and attorneys general when they've taken effect. But it's been a lot of work. It's been very serious, and then, of course, it went to the federal level, with the Trump administration using the same themes to go after members of our community for obvious political purposes, with executive orders targeting our community and targeting diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and principles, attacks on lawyers, and really attempting to dismantle our own scientific and medical research infrastructure. It's really an attack on knowledge, attack on truth, and attack on people. And we've seen a really unfortunate capitulation in some institutions. I think many of us have recognized that our institutions are so much more fragile than we might have thought. Institutions are people, and people can be scared, people can be intimidated. If you wondered really when I say unprecedented, is it really unprecedented? It is unprecedented. There have been more executive orders coming out of the Trump White House at a rate than we have ever seen before, at a rate that looks to eclipse in the first year what George W. Bush did in 8 years, in 2 terms in the White House. Now, these slides have a lot of text. Don't try to read them all. If anyone's interested, I'm happy to share the slides. What I want to show here is these are the first 6 executive orders issued within the first days of the Trump administration, essentially defining transgender and non-binary people out of existence and intersex people out of existence with a made-up definition of gender, going after DEI programs, which folks have seen how that has played out in the months of this administration, banning transgender folks from service in the military, and attempting to block access to gender-affirming medical care for young people, and to ban trans girls from participating in school sports programs. So these are the themes that are unfortunately familiar and the themes that Lambda Legal has been litigating about for quite a while. And again, don't try to read all the words on the slide, but this just gives you a sense, at a rate 3 times the attacks on LGBTQ plus people, this administration has been going after school, teachers, education, facts, history, you name it. And this is all about rewriting the national script according to a particular sort of ideology and orthodoxy. And it's untrue, and it's massively problematic. But don't think for a minute that this has gone unchallenged. Those of you who follow this in the news may know this. Just as there have been unprecedented attacks, there is an unprecedented amount of litigation. As a litigator, I will say, you're welcome. That's what we're here for. And this is litigation across the subject areas. So there's an organization called Just Security that some of us have gotten to know well that tracks these lawsuits across all of the different subject areas. The attacks on immigrants, the attacks on DEI, the attacks on science, the full range of attacks, including the attacks on LGBTQ plus people. And so Lambda Legal filed 6 cases in the first 4 months of this administration. That was quite a rate because, you know, we were already busy dealing with the states. How in the world did we do that? Well, we had prepared in advance because we had been seeing the themes, the attack themes in the, okay, did somebody just hit a power cord? Hang on just a second. It looks like we lost power. Yes, okay, see. Pause for technical difficulties, huh? Okay, we'll give it a cent to reboot. So I can keep talking while the TV boots up. We prepared in advance. But not for a power failure. Well, you know, we're ready for anything. And lawyers can talk, whether we have a TV screen or not. So we prepared in advance, and this is the blessing and the curse, because during Trump 1, we faced many of the same themes. The attack on honorable transgender folks serving in the military. Thank you, Rick. He makes everything happen. So attacks on honorable transgender folks serving in the military, we dealt with that during Trump 1. Attacks on DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, we dealt with that successfully, I may add, during Trump 1. Attacks on transgender young people, we've been dealing with that for years. So we were prepared. We expected these things would come again. And also, of course, it was no fun, but we read Project 2025, and the stuff was all outlined right there. And during the Trump campaign, the vicious attacks on transgender people, hundreds of millions of dollars spent on anti-trans attack ads. So we prepared. And as soon as the Trump administration put out the executive order to shut off access to medical care for trans youth, we were prepared, we filed suit. And I'm happy to say we secured a preliminary injunction that remains in effect today, even as the government has appealed that. That case is on appeal, but the preliminary injunction blocking that executive order is in place. We sued to protect the transgender folks serving in the military, and again we got an order from the court blocking that executive order. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court decided to block the blocking of the executive order. No explanation. This is something I'll mention a little bit more later about the emergency docket that the Supreme Court has been using to block court orders without giving us any reasoning therefore. So later this month, our colleague who leads our transgender and non-binary rights project, Sasha Bookert, who herself is a retired Marine, is going to be arguing before the Ninth Circuit on behalf of the honorable patriotic trans service members, many of whom at this point have been booted out of the service or had to retire, and they probably will not be coming back given how they've been treated. So the loss to our military preparedness is incalculable and idiotic, frankly, I may say. But the legal argument continues because the principle is incredibly important. And I will say, for those of you who are inspired to obtain a copy of our book, you will see that fighting against discrimination against service members has been part of Lambda Legal's history from the very beginning. 2 of our first cases were in defense of gay men who were kicked out of the military because they were gay and fought back. And we have had some success in this area. We've also had a lot of failure. But I will say, on defending our military service members, whatever people may feel and think about the military, defending those folks has been among our most important efforts of educating people about who we all are and how idiotic the discrimination is. We've been filing lawsuits challenging the executive orders, banning diversity, equity, and inclusion, which basically, this is the administration turning civil rights laws on their head, using anti-discrimination laws for discrimination. It's really right out of George Orwell. And so we have 2 cases, one on the East Coast that we're doing together with the Legal Defense, the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, another on the West Coast that we're doing on behalf of the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, the LA Center, a dozen of our community-based organizations that have had funding cut off because in order to do the work that the government has contracted for them to do to take care of our most vulnerable community members, they have to be able to acknowledge who people are. You can't expect people to come and receive services if you insult them to their face by refusing to acknowledge who they are. That's just competence in the field of social services and medical services. We also filed a lawsuit. The first lawsuit about passports was filed by our dear friends at the ACLU. They got a nationwide injunction. That's incredibly important because as a movement, we try not to put all our eggs in one court basket. We filed a second case, and we also have secured an injunction to protect the plaintiffs in our case. These are essential identity documents for members of our community because many states, California is wonderful, I will say, California is wonderful, but many states don't allow trans folks to update their identity documents to accurately reflect who they are and how they live. So US passports is something that is an essential document. And at this point, trans folks are able to get accurate documents from our government. The appeals are ongoing, and I'm, of course, worried about our Supreme Court. But for now, that's in place. And researchers. We have been able to secure a court order that is protecting millions of dollars in committed federal funding for research about the health and well-being of members of our communities. Some of the research efforts, I mean, there's multiple lawsuits about the billions of dollars that have been summarily cut off, contrary to contracts, that are about our medical and scientific infrastructure. And we're very, very proud of the organizations that we're representing that are doing that research work. Again, it's about having accurate information to be able to provide accurate services, accurate medical care, and to dispel the lies about who we are and what we need. And right out of Shakespeare, right, first thing we do, say the authoritarians, is we kill all the lawyers. And this administration has been missing the lesson that Shakespeare was trying to convey with that language and has been attacking law firms. The takeaway lesson from this, though, is there were 5 different executive orders targeting specific law firms. These are the major law firms, all of which do extraordinary pro bono work, including for Lambda Legal and for other important social justice causes that the administration disfavors and is going after those law firms. Well, 4 of those law firms have fought back, and all 4 have prevailed in court. the one that capitulated and agreed to provide millions of dollars of free pro bono services for the president's pet peeves, they've been losing lawyers. It's one of the biggest law firms in the country, and it's shrinking because guess what? Some of us who really believe in the rule of law don't want to help undermine the rule of law. So that's a piece of good news. We have some more good news happening in our work against the state discrimination. So one example is that we're litigating in states where there's a protective state constitution, litigating under a state constitution where the state high court has the last word, and where we're having some good success. This is one example, the great state of Montana, where minors are able to access gender-affirming medical care because we prevailed in the state Supreme Court. And then we're fighting back against the efforts to censor the so-called don't say gay or trans laws that a number of states have been passing, and Iowa is one of them, and so far we've had some good luck there. This is litigation in the federal court, so it means eventually it may go to the US Supreme Court, and that's a bit of a problem, but so far the teachers and the students and the librarians are protected in the great state of Iowa. The shadow docket, this is something that is new for those of us who practice law in our federal courts, and in particular do civil rights law. There have been hundreds of lawsuits against the Trump administration, and some of them, the lower federal courts have been doing a great job, so many court injunctions to block this administration, and the courts of appeal also, for the most part, have been doing a good job because they've been applying precedent. And precedent says the president doesn't get to behave this way. The administration doesn't get to behave this way. The US Supreme Court has been acting in an unprecedented manner and blocking a bunch of those sensible, well-reasoned, articulated court injunctions without giving explanation, just saying, no, for now, we're not ruling on the merits, but the administration can proceed. And this has allowed essentially the decimation of the Department of Education, firing of federal workers, the discharge of transgender military service members, and a lot of deportations that are outrageous of folks who are undocumented but should not be deported. I'm going to briefly give a couple of lowlights from the Supreme Court. The decision folks are probably aware of that came this past June in our challenge with the ACLU to Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming medical care for minors. There's a terrible and a less terrible aspect of this decision. The terrible one is that this decision is allowing medical care to be cut off in Tennessee and is sending a signal to other courts in other states that these bans are acceptable. The less terrible thing is that the reasoning makes no sense and is actually quite limited. So there's something very disingenuous of what the Supreme Court is doing now, not really owning what they're doing and saying, oh, well, there was no evidence or this or that in the record. But there was. Oh, and we're not ruling on this or that. Okay, but the ruling you're giving us doesn't make any sense. So we see that as an opportunity. I mean, it's a devastating, disingenuous message to the folks who are targeting trans young people and otherwise using transgender people for bad purposes and spreading disinformation about who trans folks are. But it gives us lots of things to argue about in the other cases we're doing, and trust me, we have a bunch of other cases ongoing. The Mahmoud case, this is a Supreme Court that has been steadily expanding religious freedom to discriminate. It's been a problem for quite a while. There's been a whole series of cases. Each one of them, Masterpiece Cake Shop, Fulton was about foster care. There have been a number of them, and each one is quite narrow, but it sent a steady signal encouraging folks who want the freedom to discriminate, and to discriminate in particular against LGBTQ plus people. So this is a trend that's been going on for a while. This is another example. This was about Montgomery County, Maryland. It made a point to include some storybooks that include LGBTQ plus people among the many storybooks for kids during story hour, showing the diversity of families, the diversity of people, to create an inclusive environment, which we know makes all the difference in the world for kids, really for all of us, but for kids. And there were some parents represented by one of the right-wing Christian legal groups saying, we want to be able to opt our kids out. You're indoctrinating our kids contrary to our religious beliefs. Now, it has been the rule for a long time that people who object to part of a public school curriculum have a great option, private school. That you can go to religious school, and that's fine, but you don't get to dictate the curriculum for everybody else in the public school. And in particular, you don't have religious rights to dictate what is available to everybody else. The Supreme Court has deviated from well-settled law in this decision that just came down this last session, saying that it was indoctrination for there not to be an opt-out option for parents. So this is new, it's hugely problematic. I will tell you, in the time since this was issued this past summer, there's only been not even a handful of families in Montgomery County that have taken advantage of the opt-out, but it is a problem. The doctrine is being changed, and if the opt-out is specific to material about LGBTQ plus people, that's stigmatizing. If it's more general, it makes it very difficult to run a public school. So we have a bit of a problem at the moment. And I do think the answer, again, the answer is always people coming out and telling stories, because what we're aiming to do, and what we aim to do with all our legal work, is get to a society where people don't want to discriminate, and that they kind of recognize that it's not nice, it's hurtful. You know, and especially for people who feel that they're trying to live according to good ethics and religious principles, do no harm. And so that is, again, why if the Supreme Court is continuing to behave this way, which unfortunately I think it will, there's that much more responsibility on all of us to do the educational work, to come out as allies or to come out as whoever we are, so that other people can understand what we have to do to create the society that we all want. And in due course, it'll take a while, but I am confident some of these terrible decisions are going to be overruled, just as we did with Bowers against Hardwick. So wrapping up in just a minute here, a couple of cases that are coming up in the court now. So the things to not look forward to, but to be paying attention to. So the Childs versus Salazar case was just argued, and the first week of October is when the Supreme Court opens the term, and this is a case challenging Colorado's ban on so-called conversion therapy, conversion practices, which we know, and all of the major medical and mental health organizations in the country, and really internationally at this point, recognize that these are terribly harmful practices. We are who we are. You know, you can use aversion practices to make us hate who we are and feel shame and feel terrible, but you can't fundamentally change who we are. And these laws have been an important step forward. In California, as if I remember correctly, was the first, as so many, thank you, John, as you know, as on so many important civil rights issues, California really has created state-of-the-art best practices, protections, but Alliance Defending Freedom is, at this point, the largest, the most aggressive, and unfortunately clever of the legal groups that is systematically attacking the civil rights protections that we have. And given how the argument went in front of the Supreme Court, I'm quite worried that this Supreme Court is going to say that there's a free speech, perhaps infused with religious freedom, right of people to engage in these practices with a medical license. I want to be clear. The distinction here is whether it's medical care. It's 100% protected as pastoral counseling or some other kind of religious counseling or conversation or political agitation or whatever, just not with a medical license as medical care, because it's not medical care. And if the Supreme Court says otherwise, it will be a blow to medical standards as well as further opening of the door to a lot of harm to people who are put through these practices. So the Hecox case and BPJ are two cases about state laws excluding trans girls from participating in school sports programs. The BPJ case, Becky Pepper Jackson is our client, who's this adorable kid who's in middle school, who just loves participating in track. Don't tell anyone, but she's not actually the most outstanding athlete. She loves playing and participating in the team. It's part of what her family does. They're all runners. Now she's doing the shot put, apparently, and the something else that you throw. I'm not sure what it is. And she's part of a team. And she's the only trans kid in West Virginia who has come forward wanting to participate in school sports. So the state of West Virginia has made it a top priority to make sure this one middle school girl cannot participate with her friends on her team. It's just mean. It's just mean. So these two cases are being argued, are being briefed now in the Supreme Court, and the argument will probably be in the early part of next year. So I have a lot of people asking, is marriage equality threatened? And you know, I don't really have a crystal ball. I think basically no, but I want folks to know that there is an effort to underway. Again, the Alliance Defending Freedom and other organizations, including, this is Kim Davis, the famous, like people didn't even know, what does a county clerk do? Well, among some of the things that in Kentucky, county clerks issue marriage licenses, and Kim Davis did not want to issue marriage licenses after the Supreme Court ruled in our Obergefell versus Hodges case, and citing her own religion while she was performing a public function, not something you get to do, and so she was punished. She was defying the court. The court said, you have to do your job. She refused, so she had a short stint in prison for defying the court as a sanction. Thereafter, a couple who was refused a license and repeatedly refused a license and subjected to Kim Davis's religious views about why they were not entitled to a license, they sued her for what she put them through. And this is a case that is ongoing now. It's been ongoing for basically a decade because Kim Davis is taking up the cause, and Liberty Counsel that's representing her is taking up the cause because they want to ask the Supreme Court, which has a different composition now than it did when the Obergefell decision was issued, to revisit Obergefell. And part of the reason they're doing that is that two members of the court, Justices Alito and Thomas, have repeatedly said publicly, including from the Supreme Court in a writing, that they think Obergefell was wrong. Well, we know they thought it was wrong. They disagreed when it was issued. That's not news. But they are basically inviting members of the public to bring them opportunities to revisit it and reverse it. I will tell you, in law school, first-year law school, civil procedure, they teach us courts are not supposed to do that. They're not supposed to reach out and invite things. They're not supposed to be giving advisory opinions. So this Supreme Court is doing a bunch of things that are unprecedented. But we don't think that this case is going to be the case where the Supreme Court does that. For a whole bunch of reasons, it's a terrible vehicle for revisiting that issue. And also, public opinion at this point is roughly 70% in support of the freedom to marry for same-sex couples. Congress, at the end of 2022, enacted the Respect for Marriage Act, which means even if the Supreme Court were to reverse Obergefell, which I frankly think is unlikely, even given the current majority, because there's such strong public support, and the Trump administration did not make a big deal of attacking same-sex couples and marriage equality. They've been going after trans folks, but they haven't been going after same-sex couples. But even if that were to happen, the Respect for Marriage Act means that for purposes of federal law and for purposes of state law, married same-sex couples are to be treated as married, even if a state were to say, we will no longer license same-sex couples to marry. Perhaps Texas might do that, to just pick a state. But other states will continue to welcome same-sex couples to marry. California, of course, thanks to the wonderful repeal of Prop 8, and many other states. that is true and will remain true. So that's not the thing to worry about. The thing for us to be worried about is the attacks on members of our community who deserve our love and support. And for all of us who have lived through and understand the past cycles of hateful, irrational, politically motivated attacks, it's our turn to step up and be allies now. Because much as you know, LGBT people, as LGB people, lesbian, gay, bisexual people are a minority, transgender and non-binary folks are a tiny minority. And the impact of these attacks is real. Lambda Legal has a legal help desk. We have thousands of people who call every year seeking legal information and guidance. As of June of this year, the calls for help to the help desk matched the total number of calls of 2024. And the shift in the subject of those calls is dramatic, where last year it was roughly balanced between sexual orientation-related discrimination problems. Now it's overwhelmingly anti-trans discrimination problems. And while we have more support than we have ever had before, one example being the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, which is an umbrella organization based in Washington of hundreds of organizations that do civil rights work and labor, workers' rights, immigrant rights. More than 130 NGOs, nonprofits have joined. Lambda Legal, of course, has joined in a pact to stand together against what the Trump administration is doing. So sort of unprecedented amount of standing up and pushing back against the attacks. We've seen a shift in public opinion against recognition and support for trans and non-binary folks. So we still do have a majority of support for non-discrimination protection in employment and housing and public spaces. That's really important. But we now see majorities supporting bans on medical care for young folks for gender dysphoria treatment. We see much more support than we ever had before for restricting access to the appropriate restrooms for trans folks, which basically means people can't get to the bathroom in a public place if there's a restroom restriction that requires people to only use a restroom that doesn't correspond to who they are and how they exist in their day-to-day life. And then the support for restricting access to school sports is a supermajority, 2/3 support. And the problem there is that it's buying a false narrative that there's a problem here, there's an unfairness here, that cisgender, that non-transgender girls and women are being unfairly taken advantage of or victimized or losing opportunities. And that's just not true, but it's that kind of lie that somebody else is being harmed if trans folks have equality. That's the kind of political targeting that then it grows. Because of course, it's not true about sports, it's not true about restrooms. I mean, who's most vulnerable to attack in restrooms? Well, it's transgender folks, and of course in the range of other places. So again, all of us, including all of you, can help making the case that we need to make urgently, because while we have prevailed again and again against these cycles of targeted discrimination, it's our job to try to make this cycle be ever faster. I mean, the discrimination and the abuse has happened faster because of social media and the aggressive millions of dollars of political targeting that has spread so much disinformation. We need to bring this cycle to a close as fast as we can to save as many lives as we can. And my hope is that those of you who are interested in purchasing this book will be inspired and see the examples and see the role that we all have to play. And the QR code will take you to a donation page on the Lambda Legal website. And if you make a donation of $60 or more, then you can get the book. And you should email me or Rick to let us know that you have done that, so that we'll know that your donation was for a book and we'll send you a book. I have 5 copies of the book here, and we have lots of them, and I encourage you to take advantage. So I'll stop here.
So yeah, we're going to encourage all of you to be allies.